Okay, see, I'm in this book. You get the. That's what we're reading, and this is part one, story 9, Two Strange Dreams. That's what it says. And let me move the mouse out of the way and set my book down. It doesn't have any illustrations or watercolor paintings or anything that's in this book on this page. So, part one, story 9, Two Strange Dreams. Anxious to get rid of Joseph at a profit, the Ishmaelites sold him to Potiphar, captain of the guard of Pharaoh's court, who wanted a lad to keep around the house, to help him around the house. And so it came about that the son of one of the richest men in Canaan, who but a few days before had enjoyed everything he wanted in his father's house, was now no more than a slave, at the beck and call of a heathen master. It must have been very hard for poor Joseph to take, but he made up his mind, with God's help, to make the best of it. Whatever he was asked to do, he will he asked to do, he will he did it well and faithfully, and his pleasant manner soon endeared him to everybody around. Potiphar himself took a great fancy to him, and gradually gave him more and more important tasks to do. The Bible says, his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he do to prosper in his hand. Not a word reached him from his old home. Nobody came to set him free. He was on his own, alone in the world. But, and then we go to the next page. And remember, this is an old book and it hadn't been used in a very long time. But as the days and weeks and years went by, he tried hard to live a good, clean, upright life before the Egyptians. His honesty, thankfulness, truthfulness, his honesty, truthfulness, and gracious spirit made a very great impression on them. He was a faithful witness to God, for God, and the truth he had been taught in boyhood by his father and his mother. One day, Potiphar told Joseph that from now on he would be the overseer or business manager of all his affairs. This was quite a promotion from a slave, for a slave, and Joseph must have been very happy about it. No doubt he decided to try still harder to please his master. Soon his wisdom and his winning ways were making everything run with a wonderful smoothness in Potiphar's household, and the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessings of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. As the Elizabethan or King James. So he made everything like super cool for Potiphar. Potiphar was so pleased with Joseph that he left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he had did eat. Save the bread which he had eat. Okay, so this is so all he had to worry about was just eat, pretty much. Then, just as everything was going well, terrible trouble came. Potiphar's wife accused Joseph falsely for doing something very wrong. Oh, that's a really bad story. And if you want to read it, you need to read it. But she accused him pretty much of rape. I'm gonna flat out say it. Her story was untrue and most unfair, but her husband felt that there was nothing else he could do but to order Joseph thrown into prison. It was enough to break Joseph's heart. He knew he was innocent. He had taken a firm stand for the right, and enticed, when enticed to do evil, he had nobly said, "How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And now here he was in prison, chained in a dungeon like a common criminal. All his his trying to be a faithful witness for God seemed to have been in vain. How hard it must how hard it is to be misjudged, isn't it? Yet Joseph would not let himself despair. Night after night, as he laid in his cell, the iron fetters, fetters, hurting his feet, he remembered the story his father had told him of his struggles in the night and how he held, had held on God until daybreak when the sunrise came again. And he made up his mind that he too would be a prince of God and prevail. Because of his decision to be faithful to the Lord, whatever happened, the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. What a fine young man he must have been to have been made the same good. Okay. What a fine young man he must have made to must have been to have made a good impression on everybody, no matter where he was, even in prison. He was a born leader, too, and pretty soon the keeper of the prison placed him in charge of all the other prisoners and trusted him so completely that he looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it prosper. In other words, he was a really good prisoner, and he got to be in charge. And yes, there is an illustration up at the top. It's of Potiphar and Joseph. Okay, now let's go to the next story, our next page. Okay. One day, two new prisoners arrived. One was the Pharaoh's chief butler, and the other was the chief baker. Just what they had done wrong we're not told, Perhaps it was something to do with food and drink, and they had supplied food and drink they had supplied to His Majesty, the Pharaoh. Excuse me. Whatever it was, it made Pharaoh angry, and he had ordered them in prison. Joseph was able to sympathize with them, for he knew what it was to be unjustifiably punished. His kindly nature led them to be friendly to them, and they liked him for it. But in this one version of the movie, one guy got really mad, one of the got really mad at him and had him flogged, had Joseph flogged. But that is a movie that I kind of like that movie. And had him flogged and beat to death, or flogged really to death. So that's what they did. And of course, these prisoners were the highest of all prisoners. Okay, let's get back to our story. And I'm sorry I talk about movies a lot because that's what I do. Okay, one morning, as uh, when he went to see them in their cell, he noticed they were both looking worried. "Why do you look so sadly today?" he asked cheerfully. "Anything wrong?" Then they told him they both had dreamed strange dreams and couldn't understand their meaning. Do not interpret Do not interpretations belong to God? Joseph said. Tell me them, I pray you. Thus he thus he let them know what that thus he let them know what he was that he was the servant of God of heaven, and God who knows everything, and who is willing to help his faithful children in every time in every time of need. In every time of need. Then the chief butler told his dream. About it was about a vine which had 3 branches. Buds came on the branches which opened into blossoms, and they came clusters of grapes which ripened. Finally he picked the grapes and squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup and put the cup into his hand. A very simple dream, yet the butler was sure it had a very important meaning. "You're right," Joseph said. "It has, for the 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head and restore thee unto thy place, and thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand, after the formal manner when thou wast his butler." Elizabethan King James. You imagine how pleased the chief butler was when he had the good news. All his sadness vanished, and he felt very thankful to Joseph for interpreting his dream like this. Joseph now saw a chance to get himself out of prison. "Remember me when it shall be well with thee," he said to the chief butler. And show kindness, show, shew, shew kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also have I done nothing that they should put me into the dungeon." Gladly the butler promised to remember him. Then the chief baker told his dream, hoping that Joseph would be able to give him good news also. He said that his dream he had 3 white baskets on his head. On the top one was all kinds of, well, it says all kinds, but I know the story. And here's the little illustration. Joseph's talking to him. Right, and let's, in the top one, all kinds of cookies such as the Pharaoh liked. And the birds came and ate them up. Joseph saw the meaning of his dream, but he didn't like to tell it. The 3 baskets, he said, are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall the Pharaoh lift thine hand up from off thee and hang thee on a tree, and the birds shall eat thy flesh from off thee. That's a big warning, guys. Sorry about what it says. Poor Chief Baker, there was no smile on his face now. And it came to pass on the 3rd day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again, but he hung the chief baker, just exactly as Joseph had told them. Down in the prison, the news soon got around as to what had happened to the chief butler and the chief baker, and Joseph must have marveled how exactly his interpretation of the 2 dreams had come true. No doubt, too, he kept wondering and wondering if the chief butler would mention him to the Pharaoh and have set him free. But months and after months passed, and no word came. The chief butler had forgotten all about him. Poor Joseph. He had to stay in prison another 2 whole years. That's what it says. And then, of course, it has an illustration down at the bottom of Pharaoh talking to somebody. They don't say who it is, but the Pharaoh's talking to somebody. And that was story part 1, story 9, and we're going to the next one here in a few, and we'll see what happens.